So Sarah, welcome to Pine Founder Series, and thanks for making time for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think we're interviewing a lot of our founders who are building incredible businesses. Before maybe we even get there, tell us about yourself. You're one of the rare founders among Pine Portfolio that you've actually moved from Canada to Asia a while back, and you built an incredible career in fashion and retail before you started Retykle. So maybe we'll start from there.
Yes, I'm Canadian, born in Toronto, and actually started my career in New York. I was working for Bloomingdale's while I was in university, and just fell in love with the industry from quite an early age, from days on the retail floor and then through to Bloomingdale's working in buying. And then when I graduated university, I knew which industry I was going into, so I went straight in and worked for Holt Renfrew in Canada, which is part of Selfridge's group. So wanted to get into the market that was growing the most at the time, which was China. And so, not speaking Chinese myself, I moved to the nearest market to China and that explosive growth. So I found myself in Hong Kong with 3 suitcases in 2008 and no job.
I thought you already had a job offer, that's why you moved.
So I didn't want to take a job with somebody I hadn't met yet. So I had contacts, I had offers in pocket, but I didn't take a job until I arrived. So it was about 3 weeks later that I ended up taking a job with Lane Crawford, but I didn't have employment when I arrived. I wanted to make sure that everything felt right with the people that I was going to be working with. So I worked for Lane Crawford for a number of years and then moved to DFS, which is still an LVMH company, and then Shanghai Tang, which at the time was a Richemont company, and always in different facets and roles in management and planning, merchandising, product development, design, all different spheres of fashion, but always perpetuating what was next on the fashion frontier and primarily in women's wear.
So Sarah, would love to jump into the story of you starting Retykle. My version of the story that I heard was that you actually started as a Facebook mom group. So maybe walk us through, you were in fashion retail, and then how did you even come up with the idea and what did you do before even starting the company?
Yeah, I became a mom, and that was essentially the seeds for the idea started to grow when I had my own baby and had this long career in fashion and inventory management, and I had a child at the time that was probably 6 months old and had already outgrown probably 5-6 sizes by that point, and he just left behind a trail of clothes that were either barely used or not used at all. And I just felt compelled that these things had to find a new home, had to find an efficient way into people's homes that could reuse them because they had more life to live. And I probably naively thought, well, I can solve this because I know how to manage inventory. I know some of the systems that would be involved in making this efficient, and just set about, it was actually not through a Facebook group, but what existed at the time was Facebook groups. That was all that there was these localized Facebook groups that were for trading. So you could see the activity or the underground attempt by parents to trade, but it was wildly inefficient. So I wanted to create something that had widespread participation, that felt good, that felt efficient, that didn't feel like a pain or a time allocation that parents in particular really don't have. So I set about to create this platform system whereby parents could trade and share what they no longer needed.
So you were thinking about Retykle. How did you start it? When did you say, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to start this business? Maybe walk us through that. Maybe I'm sure it was a while before you really finally made up your minds.
Yeah, I was on the brink of taking another corporate job at the time, and it was for another one of the big fashion conglomerates. And it was as though I had the idea and then it just left the station. Like I couldn't not do it. And it felt, and I think this comes back to when you're building a purpose-led company, it felt so needed in the world that I felt like, okay, well, if I'm not going to do it, then who is? And I felt like I had some of the tooling in order to start it. And I was also with baby at the time, so it was a full-on endeavor, but I also felt like I had some time and space as well to think it through while I had my first child. And Retykle was actually born alongside my second child 2 months before she was born. So I had 3 kids at the same time, and was really living and breathing the problem that I was endeavoring to solve, which I also think is important, or at least to the inception of the idea, is that I was at the nucleus of the problem and living it through my peer group as well.
So I know you're not a technical founder. So how does one who's been in all her professional career in fashion retail build a tech company?
Yeah, I think, and our first CTO, I think, really taught me this, is that a lot of tech is human intuition. So I think, like any product, whether it be something you build in the physical world or in the technical world, a lot of it comes down to how your customer will interact. And almost everything is possible with tech, and it's at its core still a human product where you're building for a human interaction. So I always approached tech from that point of view, is that I feel like almost anything is possible, but at the core we're building a product for a human to interact with. So always took a very human-centered approach, and then always worked with people in an engineering or technical capacity who had the patience to work with a non-technical founder and bring my education up as we've worked on the product.
So you've added on a very exciting feature I like, which is virtual closet, that I think is one of the main features of Retykle now. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, just the way that we've been building product is to cater to our customer, and we're extremely close to our customer on the sell side and on the buy side. And one of the things that we've always encouraged as a circular platform is that when somebody buys from us secondhand, we're encouraging them in all of our communication to send those items back to resell with us. So it's a temporary ownership. We want that loop to continue spinning. But what we realized is that we were asking people to send these items back, and then when they were coming back to us, we were treating them as though they were brand new products. So we were photographing, pricing, listing those items again. And so through customer feedback, we realized, well, why are we treating these items as though we've never seen them before? They're just sitting in someone's closet and coming right back to us. So now when you buy something from Retykle, that purchase automatically goes into your digital closet, and it's a digital identifier that then when you're ready to book a pickup, which happens typically every 3 months, there's another closet rotation, you simply just click on the items that you want to come back to Retykle. So they're just a temporary stamp in your closet and then get passed back to us. And then of course for us, the efficiency is much higher. All we need to do is QC those items, and then they go back into our shelves. We also have a data trail that will inform us which brands last the longest, how many rotations, which items, and that's all data that as we scale is super important and just not accessible typically to brands. So it's an exciting new feature, and it also allows customers to add any of their external purchases. So if they've bought something elsewhere, they can add those items to their closet. They can see the resale value, the estimated resale value of their whole closet, and also the carbon savings associated with reselling those items. So it acts as a digital wardrobe, and that's part of a much bigger plan and idea that we have around just this value context of what we own.
What are some other major features at Retykle that you are excited about and growing really fast?
Yeah, I think coming back to technology, will unlock the capabilities and any friction points that still exist in some of these re-commerce models. I personally believe technology is going to solve for. And one big advancement in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months for us has been the incorporation of AI into our model. So now when we take a photograph of an item, everything that the photograph can see is tagged, including the product description. So we lift without a human touch almost all of the inputs that identify the product, which is one great feature. And then we're now working on our own pricing model, whereby we'll be able to attribute the original price of the item and then also the price that associates best with the demand of that product. So we both have an AI product attribution model and then also a pricing model, and we're just constantly excited about further technological advancements and how this will further the scalability of re-commerce. So we can imagine many other things, but those are the projects that we've been working on and have really enhanced efficiency.
Another thing is our users at Retykle are very loyal and the retention level is high. What do you think the reason is? Because a lot of the marketplace or secondhand, it's very transactional. So what's unique about Retykle?
Yeah, I think this might come back to my luxury days, but one of the key principles in luxury is that you create and nurture a relationship with your customer, because over the long term, there's enormous value that can be extracted if they're loyal to your brand. And so I think I came from that schooling of making sure that your customer is seen, taken care of, and that is both loyal, but then also creates advocacy. So we started the company with the idea that basically our customer is our marketer, and we have to make good on the experience to the end point that they feel not just satisfied with their experience, but they feel so satisfied that they will advocate for us. And so I think we just obsessed over making sure that we delivered on a great experience for that advocacy. And then in turn, that has led to it being really a part of our customers' lives. So it fills a purpose, it fills a need, it's a solution, it's a problem that parents have. And so once they discover us, it becomes a part of their life. It's a habit formation, and we call them retyclers, it's retycling. It's really a community whereby we think it's a part of your parenting journey. And we also recognize that there's a huge amount of value to extract from maternity through, in our case, currently we cater up to 14 years old. So you're talking about a potential 15-year lifetime value with this customer. So there's a lot of value to be extracted over time. And we have a retention rate between 70 and 80% on both the buyer and the seller side. So we have this reliant cohort that's constantly moving with us as we grow and building. And we are constantly evaluating whether we're still making good on that experience through focus groups, surveys, personal interactions with our customers, and reorienting our priorities based on what they share with us. And our customer is super engaged, because when they give us feedback, we do something about it. And we have a feedback loop where we'll say, we heard that this was important to you, and this is what we're doing to fix it. So they actually feel like they're building the company with us, and they're responsible for some of the changes, and then they can see the changes. So it just makes them feel engaged.
Your business is built around reuse and recycle. Can you tell us some crazy stories or interesting items you've come across? Any interesting customers that you dealt with as you're building out Retykle?
Oh gosh,
there must be a lot of interesting cases.
I'll tell. This is a story I've never told publicly, but okay. In our very early days, I would say it was our first real office, not a co-share office. And I happened to be in Canada at the time. And we were trying to make pickups in the most efficient way. So at the time, we experimented with picking up on motorbikes because it was cheaper than other alternatives. And I got a call from someone in the office that said something very unfortunate has happened. The motorbike that was carrying the seller bag went up in flames. So the bag was next to the engine. And of course, new business, very nervous about, of course, making sure that every single engagement is perfect. And so we, I think still to this day, this was a creative solution by the team, and the seller is still with us today. Not going to name who the seller is, but the items were smoke damaged, and they had, some of them had a little bit of burning. And because we were a new business, we wanted to make sure that we upheld our service standards and could build trust. And trust has really been at the epicenter of everything that we've tried to do with our customer base. And so we photoshopped each of the items that had been burnt. Then we purchased the items that had any damage so that the seller got paid for all of the items that had sustained any damage. And then we washed and we repaired anything that could still be repaired. And that seller stuck with us to this day. And it was obviously a cost to the company, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose out on trust. And so whilst it's not a story that I shout about because it's never happened, again, we stopped using motorbikes and we learned from the experience. So you can't always cut corners on costs because there can sometimes be hazards that you wouldn't know of. But that was one I can think of. And then on the reuse side, I think we've just had so many incredible stories from sellers where, for instance, their kids have grown older with Retykle. They really understand the concept of reuse. So we get a lot of stories about how this has become a family philosophy, about how they consume or had ripple effects in terms of their sustainability efforts as a household. And we also have the option to donate earnings to charities. So a seller can donate their earnings to a charity of choice. And so we hear really lovely stories about kids who are then deciding how that they'll donate the earnings that they've earned through Retykle. So we have lots of great stories of how Retykle has gone beyond just recycling and influenced other behaviors in terms of sustainability.
So talking about sustainability, reuse, recycle, sustainability is at the core of the business. But you come from a fashion and retail background. What is the problem you think the fashion industry in general is facing? And how can Retykle help?
When I was in the fashion industry, I could see that there was a mismatch between demand and supply. I mean, that was obvious to me. And it was just getting worse and worse because we were producing so much. And within the industry, you're really only expected to sell through at the end of the season after discounts, everything else to 80%. So there's always this residual 20%. There's a mismatch. There's a whole demand cycle that continues to be perpetuated. And I was a planner, so I saw all of this in the figures and in our accounting. And there's that waste that's coming out of the adult fashion sector. But when I became a mom, kids are perpetuating waste just by growing, and they don't even intend to. We can hold on to our clothes for a longer duration. Kids cannot. The average kid will outgrow almost 2,000 items, and there's 2 billion kids. So you just have to start to visualize what does it look like for my neighborhood? What does it look like for my school? The amount of waste that's being created by children just by outgrowing their clothes. And so fashion has all kinds of issues, but the issue that we wanted to tackle was just this inherent obsolescence that needs a circular solution. And fashion at large, I think, will benefit from technologies that support reuse and make it scaled up, make it accessible, make it just so easy that we'll forget a moment that we ever didn't do this, and throwing away will really become something of the past. But it's so multi-pronged with fashion. There's reuse, of course, that has to become more accessible, which is one of the things that we're working on with the technology. But then the other is recyclability. So being able to go full loop and actually recycle end-of-life textiles. And that's something that we have a massive interest in participating in as soon as that technology and that that recyclability becomes available for other companies to open source and make use of. So yeah, there's so much. It's an exciting moment, but not everything exists yet today to make the whole system come together.
Obviously, sustainability is a very core to our investment strategy, and we've been looking for technology and companies that are working on the textile and fashion industry for a very long time. We just haven't found something that's scalable and commercially scalable. And when we hear your story, I thought this is it. I think I found something very interesting. So yeah, at that point in time, I wanted to ask, how did you grow Retykle? Did you fund it all yourself? And did you have some investors? And yeah, how was the fundraising journey? Because I'm sure it's also your first time fundraising.
Yes. So up until we met, I had raised some friends and family and angel investment, and mainly through network or introductions from existing investors, and then a few more strategic angels that were able to really tap into what we were building, get excited about it. For instance, the president of LVMH Asia became one of our angel investors when he saw the technology that we were building. And yeah, the fundraising journey has been very much akin to the founding journey, in that I've tried to learn as much as I can from other founders, from accelerators. It is a learning journey, just very much the same as building a company. And just like I've built the company, I really prioritize people, both the people that I work with and also on the investor side, who I want to invest in the company, because I see it as a relationship and a relationship that will carry on for at least a few years, and try to work together on building what we have in mind. And so I've really tried to assemble values aligned investors who can also be value additive, and that's something that I really found with Pine.
Maybe on the global expansion, let's talk about fast forward now. You're operating in Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, a little bit of US. We'll get to US soon, but tell us about Dubai. Why did you open Dubai? What was rational? What was the experience like opening Dubai?
Yeah, so with Retykle, I mentioned just we have a very high engagement with our customers, and then oftentimes they move, right? So they start with us in Hong Kong, or they start with us in Singapore, and then they, if they're not from those cities, then they may move elsewhere. And so we get often, I've sent some to Hoogte, but we get inbound very regularly asking if someone can open Retykle in a particular market. We've had that from Sweden, we've had it from the US, we've had it from Thailand, and we're constantly getting inbounds asking for us to open in these other markets. And Dubai happened to be a market where there has been quite a lot of fluidity between Hong Kong, Singapore, and Dubai in the expat market. And we had a pull factor. So we had somebody on our team actually that had been with us since the early days. And she really made a strong pitch for opening Retykle in Dubai, and then was able to secure local investment. And it was an opportunity for us to expand beyond Asia, test a new culture, a new environment, an emerging retail hub that is really supercharged for growth at the moment. And we had an opportunity to be an early mover, and then address the broader Middle East from Dubai. So it's been a great opportunity to have, again, the market advocacy, the team member that can support the growth, and for us an opportunity to learn how we can engage some of that demand for global growth through local operators. So we're also navigating that as a means to open more markets quickly.
I want to ask more questions about you as a founder. So you've been at this for now 8 years, 9 years. Mm-hmm. And what are some of your biggest growth and learning moments that you can share?
I think actually it was already you brought it up, I think not that long ago, in relation to all portfolio companies under Pine, which was that getting through COVID was quite a material moment, I think, for any founder that took their company through COVID. And that probably, while I maybe wouldn't have pointed to that until you mentioned it, but in the context of resilience, I think COVID, you just kind of, I think all of us in like personal and work capacity just like powered through and did what we had to do to sort of survive that moment. But with a business, there were so many people to take into account in terms of their own emotional well-being, capacity to work. And then the business itself was under duress from many different points, whether it was lockdowns, team members that had to go on shift work, e-com needing logistics and logistics being off. There were many different obstacles that came along through those long 3 years of COVID. And I do think it ultimately created a sense of nothing feels insurmountable when you've been, I mean, anything hard in life, in business, if you've gone through something difficult, it makes you more prepared for the next difficult thing. And I do think we had a tidal wave of difficult things during COVID, all of us in different capacities, and going through that as a founder and as a business. I think if you made it through that period, you have some scar tissue that you bring into new difficult moments, and you're able to see a way through in an easier way.
What about now? A lot of founders and of course investor like me feels that right now in this high interest rate environment, high inflation, which is a spillover effect from low interest rate environment and printing money to get out of COVID crisis, we're feeling the lagging impacts now. A lot of IPOs getting delayed. M&A is not happening as much as before. How are you navigating the current macroeconomic environment?
It's ever changing, but I think we always oriented, or maybe this was also just my schooling in fashion, was that my P&L was down to 3 decimal points when I worked for LVMH. And so I have always had an eye towards building a foundationally solid business that could stand on its own 2 feet, irrespective of funding. And so that is still our ambition, is to be able to scale growth with capital, but not be reliant on it for our core business. And so to always have levers that we can pull if we needed to be self-sustaining. And I do think capital should be growth capital, and it should be supporting endeavors that are near-term opportunities that can allow a company to have wings to fly faster, and otherwise the business should be supported by solid business fundamentals. And so that's been the eye that I've had on building the business. And so I feel like actually the market is generally shifting in that way, as opposed to throwing tons of capital at many different things and hoping that something will fly without that solid business fundamentals. So I think we're better aligned in terms of the way that we're building for the current environment, but it still comes with many different and new challenges. And I think, even more so, you have to prove that you have what it takes to build and persevere.
So that leads me to my next question. What are some of the thoughts you could share with those entrepreneurs who are building mission-driven businesses? Because it's very, very hard. Mm-hmm. Running a business itself is hard, but doing a mission-driven, whether it's sustainability focus or equitable healthcare, it is double the hard, if not more. So what are some of the thoughts and lessons learned on that front?
I used to, in my corporate capacity, I would generally get bored in like a 2-year cycle. That was, I would feel like I had some level of mastery in 2 years, and then I would be looking for my next role. And I have not found that in the founder journey. I've remained as, I guess, interested and curious in what we're building as I was in the early days, because I have not reached mastery and there's always more to learn. But I also think being a purpose-led company is very different, because in the very hard moments, you don't feel like it's only there to serve a business purpose. It is there for something bigger than that, and you really have meaning and purpose and are solving a problem. And I might be biased because I built this company from a personal problem and mission statement, but I do think that for any founder, it should be personal. If it's a mission-based company, it should be something that really, similar to what I felt, is like, once I had the idea, once I knew the problem was big and that it needed to be solved and it wasn't solved, the train was out of the station, and then you can't stop building it. And so I think that that's something that will allow you to persevere, because it will get hard. And if you feel like there isn't a meaningful purpose, or you're not at the center of it and you're not curious enough to build it, then you will give up. There's no question. And I think that's been said in many different formats before, but I live it, and I would have given up 10,000 times over if it was something I didn't deeply care about.
My last question, this one it'll be more of a longer session, where if you're growing the business, there are many cities, countries you want to expand into. If you're looking for your next set of investors, customers, partners in those respective markets, I guess this is a message to the viewers who've been watching our interview until now. Like, who would be most ideal, and who would you like to onboard for Retykle's next chapter in the business?
I think there's so much value in having investors in the markets that you're either operating in or looking to operate in. So as we expand, I'm looking for investors that can be partners on our journey into those expansion markets. So US-based investors, eventually Europe-based investors, but really any geography that we're looking to expand to. I want to have partners alongside us. I've witnessed and been with investors that have really been participants in opening doors and shaping how we've entered into expansion markets.